Hello, I'm Panos Kotsathanasis, and this is ASEAN Movie Pulse Interviews. Today I'm here with Nelicia Low, whose film Pierce just screened at Jakarta World Cinema. How are you, Nelicia?
Hi, I'm good. I just got home. Jakarta World Cinema was really great. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, good. So I read that you used to be a member of the Singapore fencing team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I
so tell me, what do you like about fencing, and why did you decide to put it in a movie?
uh, the funny thing is that I actually wanted to be a film director since I was like 6 or 7 years old. It was this kind of very strange kind of like otherworldly feeling, life goal. I don't know why. It's a very strange calling I had since I was young. And I joined the fencing because in Singapore, when you are 13, when you enter middle school, everyone has to sort of pick a club, a society to join. So it's like Girl Scouts or something. And then I got into two clubs. One was air rifle and one was fencing.
Oh.
Both you can kill people with. Tell you what kind of person I am. No, but I chose fencing actually because I really loved Lord of the Rings and Star Wars when I was growing up. It was like, it's like, oh, okay, it's like very close to what I feel
Okay.
like lightsabers. So yeah, and then Singapore is a very small country. We only have 5 million people, so it's not that difficult at that time. 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't very difficult to be in a national team. Now the standard is much higher, but back then it was like, oh, you can run 1 mile and not die. Okay, you're a national team.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
so
uh,
mm.
yeah, were
but
you
but
any
yeah,
good?
I'm sorry.
Were you good?
Ah,
Or-
come on. Of course I would know. I mean, so I went to the Asian Games in 2010, and that was my last. I retired very young. I was like 19. Um, I think for Singapore and for the level of training we were receiving, because we weren't like full-time fencers, we were all still working or studying. I think we were good considering that.
Hmm,
But compared to the real fans, of course, I mean the South Koreans, they were amazing and stuff. But in terms of peers, like I never set off making a fencing movie. Actually, funnily enough, I did my MFA at Columbia, in New York, and I remember one of my professors was like in my entrance admission interview. She was like, "Oh, I would love to see a fencing movie." And I was thinking like, "There's no way I can make a fencing movie." Because it's really complicated. Because people, when you watch fencing, you don't really understand what's going on, right? Because there's a lot of rules and stuff. So Pierce, like the original inspiration was actually this incident on the subway. There was this mass murder, and there was this very huge difference between the family reaction, because the parents, they wanted their son executed, whereas the younger brother supported him. And then something about the younger brother's reaction reminded me of my relationship with my brother, because my older brother's autistic. And when I was very young, I used to completely idealize all our interactions. So, we always held hands. And when I was young, I didn't understand he was autistic. I just thought he was my brother. So I just remember that like we always held hands. And then later when I grew up, I realized that, oh, he never really willingly grabbed my hand. I was actually holding on with all my might to his hand because my whole family was scared he would run away. And it took me some time to really. I remember there was this one incident as well that like when I was, I think 5 or something, I wanted to run away. And then I told my father, I asked my brother, I was like, "Are you coming with me?" And then he was like, "Yes." And then I said, "Great." And then I started packing for the two of us. And then my father entered our bedroom. My father was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I'm leaving. I'm taking my brother with me." And my father was like, "Are you sure he's going to go with you? Let's go and ask him." So we went to him, and then I was like, "Are you coming with me?" And my brother was like, "Yes." And then my dad was like, "Are you really going to go with your sister?" And my brother was like, "No." "Yes." "No." And then I think that was the first time that I was like, "Oh, it's all in my head." So that's really like the what Pierce was really about. That, just how do I come to terms with the fact that I will never know what my brother really thinks of me, what if he cares for me at all. But then obviously in the process of artistic creation, I wrote the script for 5 years. The only thing I kept between my real life and the brother character is that the younger brother, aka me, we don't know what they're thinking, and then everything else was totally free for me to recreate. So the brother became someone that was very manipulative. You never really knew what he was thinking, and he always knew what you were going to do before you're going to do, and he's like a different person to everyone he met. In fact, some of the inspiration was from Ted Bundy. I read a lot of his longtime girlfriend's autobiography of him, wondering why he never killed her. Um, so then the fencing entered the picture much later, like I think year 3 of writing the script of the 5 years. That's when I was like, you know what, he'd be a really great fencer. And then the images started coming to me, because I remembered all these fencing incidents. I mean, I never had any big accident, but when the blade breaks, anything goes, basically. And the blades do break, it's like wear and tear. So yeah, that's how the fencing entered Pierce. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And tell me a bit, I find a very interesting point in the movie, the difference in how the mother and the brother perceive the older brother. Can you tell me a bit of that? Because it seems like mother knows what is happening, but the brother is in denial, essentially. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, when I was writing the script, the first 3 years as well, the mother was not in the script.
Mm,
And that's why it took me so long to write, because I was stuck. Like I couldn't figure out like where's my story. And then when I thought back to the initial inspiration, which was the what happened in the Taipei subway and the family's reaction, I remembered that I was focusing all on the younger brother, but the parents were the ones that said we cut our son off, may he be reborn as a better person in his next life. They just immediately like, and then because of the way I grew up, I realized that like, oh, there's a reason why it was like that in that family in the news. And like in my family, I can see that like, my parents, they could process my brother being autistic because they were already adults when they had him. Whereas like when I was the younger sibling, I didn't understand. It's just my brother, it's not my autistic brother. So I think there's a huge difference between, the parent-child relationship and the sibling relationship. In a way, the sibling relationship is much more equal and more unfiltered. At the same time, I think because of my personal situation where I'm in a position where I have to think like, of my future because I'm my brother's caretaker after my parents pass on. So it also makes me realize that like actually when we think of unconditional love within family, the thing that's always talked about is between the parent and child. That's the first one we think of, that bond. But for me, the most significant one in my life was the sibling relationship, because I think I realized very young on a very, I think, subconscious level that I have to look after him my whole life. And actually, the sibling relationship is forever. It's the day you're born until the day you die. The parent relationship is not that long, right? So yeah, and it was very important to me in Pierce that like the mom saw the brother this one way and with unfiltered lens. There's no, there's nothing, no veil over her eyes. At the same time, even within the siblings, I didn't want it to be super, like it's definitely the mom or it's definitely the younger brother that is correct. Because to me, when I was working with the older brother, Tao Yoning, who plays the older brother, I brought up this quote that I used that is when I was working here. It was one of my favorite quotes from a book by Jeanette Winterson. And the quote is, "As your lover describes you, so you are."
mhm.
And yeah, and I think it's very true, because I think there is some ambiguity in the brothers' relationship of how the older brother feels towards the younger brother, right? I mean, only me and the actor know exactly how he felt and what he was thinking at every point, 7 years ago, the time that he comes out. But I think at least it's kind of clear that when he first comes back, it's not fully um with the very altruistic intention of getting my brother back. It's for money at first, but then it starts to morph into something and we're not sure what it is and blah, blah, blah. So I really wanted to play with that ambiguity and this kind of like, hope maybe that like if you give someone so much idolization and so much love and so much belief, can they really turn into what you hope them to be? because in a way, I think like the tragedy of the film wouldn't have happened if the older brother didn't feel anything for his younger brother. Because it's at the point that the younger brother says, "You're a murderer," that he's like, "Oh, okay, I guess I am." And then it's a tragedy after that. Yeah.
Mhm. But also, do you feel that people can change? Because I feel that is also one of the points of the film.
Mm. I mean, it's interesting. I think in the film, because it's told through the eyes of the younger brother. So I think the main question he's always asking, is is my older brother a murderer and does he care about me? Because I think he believes that if he is not a murderer and he cares about him, that then it's okay to love him, right? Then I can love him back and then it's fine. It's like perfect. And then I think at the end of the movie, it's sort of like it reaches this place where he realizes that it doesn't really matter in a strange way, even if the truth is, I think that's why at the end he says what he says to the brother before the finale. Because I believe that, like, in a strange way, even after I realize that every memory I have of my older brother growing up is false, it doesn't change my feelings, because I still feel this very strong sense of bond and love, and maybe it's misguided and it's very blind and it's maybe it's poisonous and it's dangerous and it's bad, but then I it's to me it's equal parts beautiful and tragic. Yeah. Um so yeah, can people change? I think the question, I think that what I was trying to get as I do believe that in a way there is more hope if you give them so much belief and love, that of course there's more hope that way. But I think what I was really trying to explore is, I think it's like whether they can change or not, we can't change our feelings towards them,
Mhm.
and that is both beautiful and horrible at the same time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
And okay, do you identify fully with the younger brother? It's like very close to your own mentality and who you are as a person, let's say.
Yeah.
He's a boy, so no, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, again, in the process of creating the character, in a way, I think all my movies are very autobiographical, but it doesn't mean that I have to make the main character a woman or something to make it autobiographical. It's the feelings that are and the emotions that are highly autobiographical. So yes, it's me in many ways. And I think making him a boy actually could help me be even more autobiographical, because I think if it's like too similar to you, it's very, very difficult to write, actually, conversely. Um, so yeah, it's me, and I think in the most essential ways, it's me, and in other ways, it's not. Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. So now I have to ask, so how about making him gay?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting because the gay thing was actually very early on when I started developing the script. I don't know why it wasn't an intellectual thing that I was like, okay, I'm going to make him gay because I want to. It didn't happen like that. It just felt very natural that he was gay. It just felt right for the story. I'm not very sure why. Um, just- he just felt gay. Like the more the character came out as this sort of like, because he's a much more timid person than the older brother, and then it just felt right. And then at the same time, I began thinking very, carefully about where I wanted to shoot the film. Obviously, Taiwan was the first thing that my first choice, because the inspiration was partly from Taipei.
Mhm.
At the same time, I also I shot two short films there. So my art director that I worked with on Pierce, I've actually worked with for 10 years already. We sort of grew up together. So I was very gravitated towards Taiwan. And the interesting thing about Taiwan is that it's the only place in Asia that gay marriage is legalized.
Mm,
And I think that in the script, I don't see the gay sub-story as the gay sub-story. I see it as the first love. And I think the only place in Asia that it could be only seen as first love without this, oh, it's very gay, it's very conservative, without all the implications, is Taiwan, right?
mhm.
it all kind of like worked out because I think if the first love story, if the puppy love story was really bogged down with like homophobia and acceptance and super, like conservatism, it really wouldn't have worked for the story at all. Like the whole film, it would be too much because to me it's like there's this very intense thing going on between the brothers, and the love story is like what we hope he moves on to, and he just like, forget the brother, right? Just like go and have a healthy, happy first love with this very cute guy. So yeah, it just sort of like worked out like
Hmm.
artistically, with Taiwan being so open-minded, it made a lot of sense. Yeah. So I was like, I really want to show that, I've worked in Taiwan made some films in Taiwan, and I know it's very open-minded there. So I did want to show this progressiveness. Like, let's not treat it as like the gay first love. Let's just treat it as like first love.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, great, good. And can you tell me a bit about the dinner scene, which for me is the most impressive in the movie? It seems very difficult to shoot the whole circling around and what happens. So tell me a bit about that, how you shot it.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. As I said before, it's actually my favorite scene, especially the second dinner scene. You're the first one that has told me this, so I'm very, very happy because I rewrote that scene many, many times and we rehearsed a lot. So for the first dinner scene with the rotating camera, initially when me and Mihao Dimek, my DOP, we were visualizing like the look of the film. We shot over COVID, so we actually worked on the short list for 1 month over Zoom before he had to fly to Taiwan and quarantine for 2 weeks over New Year's and Christmas. So I'm
Mhm.
very grateful to him and the other two Polish guys, Chemek and Tomek, for, because the grip and the gaffer also flew in. So but the rotating thing, the first thing that we were thinking about actually was the visually before the rotating thing came along was the fencing. Because we didn't want to shoot it in this like, or maybe me as a previous fencer, I didn't want to shoot it in this really, because I think you can think like widescreen because it's the fencing piece. But to me, this is very objective. And actually, if you're a fencer, it's very subjective. You actually see the person in front of you, and you see the distance between you. And it also really reflects the relationship between the two brothers, because they're always looking at one another. And then I also needed to figure out some kind of visual cue for every time this river scene was brought up. Like every time there's a question, like, who are you really? Do you really care about me? What happened at the river? And then Mihao came up with the idea of like, okay, what if we move the camera in a very confusing way, like we rotate the camera, something, because we want to create this sense of confusion. And eventually, I felt like we needed something a bit more focused on the actors, which is why I chose those extreme close-ups. But because he had this great idea of rotating the camera, I was like, okay, this is a very good idea, but where can we use it? So in the end, we used it a little bit in the fencing club, but then in the first lunch scene, when Mimi how we're discussing the script, how do we shoot it? It just really felt like everything that they were talking about, to the point that they were like, "Oh, do you remember there was this fencer that killed somebody many years ago?" And then he was like, "Oh, why don't we use that rotating shot that we had the idea for, and we use it here?" So then in terms of rehearsals, I mean, it's very tricky because, behind the camera, everyone is moving, and, because it's 360 degrees, right? And then he also really wanted this big light. It had to be lit with one light. That was also really, really tricky, I remember. And there was a lot of back and forth with the art director of how do we make this light in the middle of the table not look fake, make it very real, but at the same time, because there's still you can't, there's no more lights we can hide in the room. And then I was lucky enough to be able to rehearse with all the actors. That scene, because there's a lot of talking. So, and then I also did a lot of rehearsal on my own with like, you know, who do I give the line to so that we can catch as much conversation as we can while we move around the table. And then we actually shot that one shot, the rotating one, that long rotating one, in 1 hour, because we had a really, really crazy shoot schedule and there was no time. So luckily me and Niha were like very prepared with the shot. We were all on the same wavelength, and then I had rehearsed with the actors, so luckily we got it within an hour of takes, about I think 10 to 11 takes, and I think we used like take 7 or 8. um So Mihao has a really good sense of where to point the camera at what character. Even though he can't speak Mandarin, he just has really strong sense. So he knew sort of like the timing, obviously I had set like who I want to speak so that he can catch as much as possible, but he still has just very like magical sense of like, like
Mhm.
what speed to camera and when to catch who. So it was a very nice, we're very lucky. I think the actors, how it all came together very in this. Yeah, I think the gods were helping us.
Okay.
1 hour, when people ask me that, can you show 1 hour? Like, yeah, it was great. Like, 1 day, it's like 1 hour.
No, that's great. That's good. And the reaction of the kid, do you mean to say like kid's instinct
Yeah.
is never wrong? Something like that was the comment there?
Yes, I'm so happy you brought this up. This is the scene that I'm most proud of. And actually when I wrote that scene, the first draft of that scene that the younger brother is like, okay, I'm going to bring my brother to the dinner to terrorize my mother. Originally, the scene was much worse. It was just like the brother was coming and like was trying to hint that he went to jail, but not hint, he was doing the opposite basically. And then in the script, I realized like, it was totally wrong. Like if the film is about Zijie and him discovering who his brother really is, then that scene should be about like, oh, you are very manipulative and you are very charming and I've not seen this before. So then I was like, oh, it should be like the total opposite. He should come and he should be like so good at acting that he's this medical student and he's like, oh, the father this, and I want to go into radiology and everyone loves him. And then the kid always cried, even in the old version, but it was much more interesting if the kid is the only one that cries in the version that all the adults are like, they love him. And then the actor Cao Youning, when he was playing the character, he was saying that, oh, it's kind of like, like in alien movies when the dog, like, the aliens are always wearing the human costume and
Mhm.
only the dog only the dog is like, what? You don't know why. And it's kind of like that. And an interesting thing that happened on set is that I remember for Yoning's reactions to the kid crying, the first two takes were like pretty good, but then on the third take I had a very good idea because when I work with my actors, I never tell them like what to do. I always ask them questions and then they figure out what to do. So I had this idea, I don't know what came with me. It was like the third take and I was like, because the first two takes his reaction was like, oh no, the kid is crying, oh shit kind of reaction, but I was like, oh, there's something, it could be like better. So then I was like, before the third take, I went to Yoning and I was like, do you think this is the first time you've made a kid cry? And then he started laughing because you can imagine that, it's kind of like everywhere he goes.
Everywhere where kids cry, right? That would be impressive,
Oh my God. Yeah, exactly, right. So he started laughing. And then the third take is the one that we use because it was so different from the first two because the reaction the third take was like, oh, it wasn't just like, oh, a kid is crying. It was like, oh crap, a kid is crying again.
Okay,
In-
okay, good, good. And also, can you tell me a bit about the scene with the massacre, let's say, how
Mm,
difficult was that and how you saw that?
Yeah, that was I mean, it was actually shot in a studio. So it was originally we wanted to shoot in this like school hall, but then it didn't work out because it was COVID, so the schools were like closed. It was actually kind of crazy. When we, the sprinkler scenes in the school and all the training scenes, we had 5 days to shoot those scenes, and then on the sixth day, the government of Taiwan announced no more shooting in schools. Everyone,
Oh,
we just we just like made it. It was so crazy. But then for the final scene, because we couldn't find, if it wasn't like a school, there was so few places that we could borrow, and me and Mihao had already had the entire shot list in mind. We had this, with the curtains floating and with this very like long sort of like floor plan, and we, so we had done everything. So then Mihao was the one that was like, why don't we just make it much more sort of in a way like how do you call it? Not experimental, but much more um it's like surrealist kind
hmm.
of like it Yeah, you know, so and we shoot it in the studio instead, and that way we can really control everything. We can keep our shot list that we had in mind. We can do everything we wanted to do, and we just changed the style, and it worked for the film in a way because it's my art director Xu Guiting and Marcus Zheng. When you know the idea for the film visually was like there would be like cues of like this dream-like experience because from the younger brother's perspective, it feels like a dream that the brother is so nice to him and he wasn't a murderer and everything. So then it made sense that the massacre scene, it will all be very surreal and almost kind of and that's why at the end when he chooses to sacrifice himself for the brother, it's also edited in a way that is very surreal. You know, I didn't intend it to be super realistic because you know, to me it's like by the end we should almost feel like did he really do that for his older brother, or you know, did he want to do it but he couldn't, you know, so that's why it was cut in this like montage way. Shooting the actual massacre scene, we had you know, not a lot of extras because it was COVID. So I remember the shot that we that the you know the mom, she opened that she's at the door and then she gets, you know, chased out by the crowd, and then the shot right after that, the one that he's going through the crowd and they're all pushing him, and then you see the boyfriend get pushed back. That one was like, I mean, we tried to do it with like I think a 70 millimeter lens. It did not work because we didn't have any extras, and we moved to the 100, and it kept going up, and finally I was like, go straight to the longest lens we have, like 180, you know. And then that's when it worked to really like compress the images so that I mean the picture so that it really felt like there was a lot more going on than what we actually had on set. And then in terms of, you know, the older brother's performance in that scene, I also didn't want it to be very, you know, like action film. To me, it should be more creepy. So we really worked on like how did he walk, what, you know, the way that even the way he walks towards the victims, like what does he do, the way that he, you know, it had to be much more like slow and creepy to me in a way. Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah. I,
mhm. And can you tell me a bit about how the casting worked for the movie? Did you search for actors who knew how to fence or that came afterwards?
if only. So I flew into Taiwan in quite early in the pandemic in late 2020, and then we were supposed to shoot 2021 summer, but it got pushed back by about a few months because of COVID again. But I had, you know, a good amount of time to cast basically. So when I arrived in late 2020, I quarantined for 2 weeks, and then I came out of quarantine, and the first person I met, the very first actor I met was the younger brother. And
Mhm,
all along, I thought that it would be so difficult to cast the younger brother because he had to be young. He had to, you know, he has a certain demeanor about him. And because the older brother, you know, like age 20 to 30, there's so many actors in the age range. I just thought, okay, there'd definitely be someone there for me to pick from. And the younger one would be really difficult to find. And in the end, it was totally opposite. I came out of quarantine and he was there. You know, and it was like and his demeanor, everything was just right for the character. He looked right. And also I picked actors that I felt had a lot more personal connection to the story. So there's something about the both of their experiences that they had in their personal lives that when I spoke to them, I was like, oh, this really, I think, works for the character. Something I can, when we rehearsed it, because we also had the luxury of rehearsing for 1 month, 12 hours a day, the entire script. So everyone was very, very prepared before the shoot, which was lucky because the shoot was really hectic. So the younger brother, he was completely new when I met him. So with all that time that we had, it was like putting him through acting classes. I really worked very closely with him to get him really prepared for the role. I felt he had a lot of potential. And he's very Meissner, very naturally Meissner, you know, so he's totally living in the moment, which is great because he's already like the character. Um, and then for the older brother, as I said, it was like I thought it was easy, it was so difficult. Um, it every actor I met, and I met basically every actor in the 20 to 30-year-old age range in Taiwan, and every single one of them, when they read the script, they will ask me, why is the older brother like this? What happened to him? And the moment they ask me this, I know that they're not right for the role because the Ning, who I cast in the end, was the only one that didn't ask. And it's not because he's like dumb or something that he didn't want to ask. He just didn't have that question. And it's also partly, I think this really says a lot about who you are and the experiences you have had, because like I think if you have experiences with people with mental disabilities of any kind, you don't ever question that. You know that sometimes people are just born and they're like this, so he didn't have any questions about that. And I eventually had the younger brother audition with three final older brothers. And what I did is that I gave three scenes, and in one of the scene, it was the first time that the younger brother goes to the supermarket. In the original script, I wrote that the older brother looks up at the younger brother and acts surprised, because obviously with this character, he's so smart and manipulative. He knows that the younger brother is going to come and find him already. Probably he already saw him and then was like, oh, I pretend not to see him. And then the other two actors acted like real surprised, but then Ning was the only one that, like, even when he read the script, he was like, oh, but I already know he's coming, right? So he knew, like, he naturally understood the character, and he naturally is extremely um repressed. So he doesn't reveal his feelings at all. Like, he's someone that is very difficult to read, but he's not doing it on purpose. So I think the difference between him and the characters, that the character's doing it on purpose, and so it's quite simple to translate that into the character. Yeah. And he and Sifu have really good connection. Like, they look like brothers. They, immediately. And I remember after the audition, I asked Sifu, I was like, so how do you feel about him? And then Sifu was like, because some brothers he came in and he was like, oh, they're too scary. And some they came in, he was like, oh, they're too nice. I really like him. It's like Goldilocks. you
Oh,
know. you know. And then with Ning, when he came in, after that, I was like, so how do you feel about him? He was like, I really don't know what he's thinking. And I was like, oh, then it's perfect.
great.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then the mom, so actually Ning is, as I said, Silfu is a newcomer. Ning is a kind of idol sort of image in Taiwan. So I think this is the first like really serious role he's taking on, and the film is releasing in Taiwan in December. So we really hope, I think he's quite excited to let audiences see this side of him. The mom, Ting Ning, she's actually she's won the Golden Horse before, Best Supporting Actress for, I think, City of Last Things. So I really enjoyed working with her because she has a great humor to her, and I feel like with the mom character, it's so easy to act it in a very tragic way and become very like, oh, this melodramatic sort of way. And I think she really she saw the character as like not tragic. She saw the character as like superwoman. Like, I'm going to hold on to this man, and I'm going to hold on to my son, and I'm going to make it work. And she really had this like, I'm going to make this work kind of like attitude to it. So I think she did a really good job as well. And she was very open to, working with a new director like me. She was not a diva. I thought, oh gosh, it'd be difficult because she's so established in Taiwan, but she's so easy to work with. And Zihang, who played her boyfriend, is actually the acting teacher of the fencers in the film. So what I did, and the actors. So what I did is I put the actors into fencing classes, and I put the fencers into acting classes. And
Mm.
Zihang, yeah, and Zihang taught all of them. Yeah. So at some classes they mix, some is like some acting classes they were all together. So it was really great. The actors trained in fencing for like 7 months. It was not easy. It's a very particular kind of sport. Ning used to be a national baseball player, but his muscle group is complete opposite to fencing. So he's like upper body strength, and fencing is purely lower body strength. So he had to really like not work out at all before the shoot and everything. But I think he really made it work on set. I think like I just had him focus on like the acting part of it. I was like, don't think about fencing, just think that I'm a I'm this national, not national, I'm this like super amazing fencer. I'm super confident. I'm going to like, beat my younger brother I'm going to, yeah, make him lose every point and make him feel like a loser. So I think once he entered the character, he could fence really well on the day off. Yeah, it was definitely the best day of fencing I've seen him do. Before that, it was very
Okay, okay. All right, all right. And how would you describe the movie industry in Singapore right now? How is it, would you say?
How is the what? Sorry,
The movie industry in Singapore in general, how would you describe it?
you mean just local movies or
Yeah,
all?
local movies, let's say for the most part.
I mean, how would I describe the industry? I mean, there are like the art house films, the very commercial films, a little bit less. I would say Pierce is more in between.
Hmm.
It's not really one or the other. There's less films in this in between bracket. Usually art house films are not popular. I mean, in general, they are not that, but in Singapore, even less so. Um, you know, uh, but my film, we're quite lucky. We're releasing it next month, in Singapore in cinemas, and a pretty. I mean, the big distributor took us on, and actually Anthony Chen, he directed Ilo Ilo and all that. He's our distributor in Singapore.
Hmm.
Um, he's very passionate about getting movies that are a bit more have an artistic flair to it, like out into like he really wants to build an audience for this in Singapore. And I think, I mean, you have to ask him for a quote instead of me, but I think he thinks that with Pierce there is some chance to do that because it's a bit more audience friendly. This is very narrative, there's some light-hearted moments and quite a bit of a thriller as well. So he's familiar with my past work. So yeah, so he's releasing in Singapore. So now I would say movie industry is still quite, there's like an art house cinema that and cinephiles will go to that, and then there's the mainstream, and it's quite divided. But hopefully in the future, we'll slowly start to build, a middle ground of like, maybe some films we will to break to have a bigger audience than yeah than in the
Hmm.
past. Mm.
Okay, okay. And last question, I guess, future projects. What are you working on next?
Yeah, so all my films are very autobiographical, as I said. So the next film is really it's partly based on my relationship, I think, with art and how much I had to sacrifice to make Pierce.
Oh,
And then it's also based on my relationship with my father, the second one, but it's set in the world of Cantonese opera.
uh-huh.
Um, yeah, because so it's set in San Francisco. It's actually in English and Cantonese. And in the past, like with Cantonese opera, it was either all male or all female. So it's about this all female kind of famous Cantonese opera couple that are aging in the States. And then the one that plays the girl, she's the main character. And her past is that she was supposed to, be the heiress to this bank, to her father's bank, but she ran away to do art. That's the autobiographical part of my life. um,
Okay.
and and then but her partner has met this like younger Cantonese opera actress, and she's on the verge of losing her and losing her career in a way. So it's about their relationship and yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Do you plan to make a sequel to Pierce, like a prison film this time, something like that,
What do you think the sequel would be about?
What happens to the younger brother, I guess, his life after that?
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
um, when I wrote Pierce, I had the ending 1 week after I had the idea for Pierce.
Mm,
So I always knew that the one brother would sacrifice himself for the other, but I knew that the answer was not love. It was something more complex than love. And I think in this case, in Pierce, at least the conclusion I came up with after 5 years of working on the story was that it's not really love, it's the fact that you cannot choose how you love and who you love. It just, and that's the tragedy. So because that was the ending that I had 5 years ago, I cannot imagine continuing the story after that.
yeah.
And funny enough, in my contract I wrote no remakes, no sequels.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Good, good. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. And I actually saw your review, and thanks so much for the nice review. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.